Today is November 27th. It is Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I hope that, well, technically not Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving was a couple days ago. But I hope everyone is still enjoying their Thanksgiving. To me, we usually celebrate Thanksgiving on Saturday because that's when everyone's home, and then I do the cooking for the family instead of the actual Thanksgivings. Usually when we go out and we eat with other people and visit and things like that. But our Thanksgiving usually happens at our house on that Saturday. I am here with Madison Prusak, who is my co-host, and we have Kristen Jacobs is another co-host that just started last week, a good friend of Madison's. And then we have sorry, I can't pronounce your name most of the time. Neveah, who is guest co-hosting this week. Neveah, and we are so honored to be able to have these two wonderful guest co-hosts on today. I am, because of my work schedule, going to have to take a break, and B will be able to try to carry the show on as I take a break so I can do other things I have going on. But before I leave for today's show, I do want to talk about a couple of things three things that are happening in Indianapolis. And one is this report that came out a couple of weeks ago or a week ago talking about in Indianapolis, 43% of the suspects for murder were out on pretrial release at the time of their murders. Now, I think that pretrial release is important, especially since I'm a criminal defense attorney. And there's no magic ball to be able to say that, hey, you are able to know exactly who is going to commit a new crime or who should stay in jail. I do think that there are forces that kind of promote letting people out of jail, which one is jail overcrowding. And some of the overcrowding, I think, is because prosecutors tend to put a lot of emphasis on keeping someone in jail. The judges might put a $100 bond on somebody and they can't pay. They're so poor, they can't even pay a $100 bond. And the jail may be full of people with these low bonds. And it's kind of like, well, what for? If it's only $100 and the person's accused of shoplifting, maybe that person should be out, and the person that's charged with a theft or something a little bit more serious, maybe that's the one that should have the higher bond. I really don't know the answer to that, other than I think the way that we currently have this bail system is obviously it's not the best. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, Mark. I think something that we need to take into consideration is the severity of the crime at hand and what kind of demographic we're working with, right? Obviously in Marion County, we do have a problem with overcrowding. And we have to take into consideration, who's going to be lodged and who's going to be put out on bail. And I think the biggest question here is what types of offenders and what types of allegations are we dealing with when it comes to these folks being let out on bond in opposition to being incarcerated for their trial. With murders taking place on bail, I mean, you got to take into consideration, like I said, the situation at hand. If we're letting a involuntary manslaughter charge someone out on bail in comparison to, maybe perhaps a misdemeanor shoplifting charge being held in the county jail, the likelihood of things happening while out on bond are more likely going to be higher in comparison to a nonviolent crime. So that's something that I feel like we need to keep in mind if we want to minimize these numbers.
Definitely. And I will say that Neveah is located here in Indianapolis, and Kristen and Madison are in the state of Florida. And I'm sure in the state of Florida, you don't have these issues to be concerned about.
Yeah, I don't hear a lot about these kinds of overcrowding issues. So I didn't have much to say on input for this situation. But yeah, not an issue we hear about locally, publicly very, very often.
Our population is usually over 50, so overcrowding in jails isn't common to our knowledge.
Well, good for you. Now, another thing is talking about the same thing with crime. That's been a big issue here in Indianapolis. Is there's an Indiana State Senator that wants to propose at this creation of a task force to address some of the crime that is going on. And I personally think that if this would help address reducing crime, more power to them. I do think that one of the issues is funding towards these communities where there is a lot of crime. It seems like the main focus is give the police more money, and law enforcement more money, instead of going to the root cause of some of these issues, which is like jobs, education, and trying to build up some
social
of these
policy.
yes.
Yeah. Social
these,
policy is a huge issue in these kind of things.
Definitely, where you have the government going in and trying to build up some of these communities and things like that. I think that is really what would help reduce some of this crime.
Yes, I'm a huge supporter of adding to the community instead of trying to reprimand the community. If you give a community a certain amount of resources, you usually see a drop in crime rates.
Absolutely. If we take our focal point and redirect it towards something more of a preventative education and kind of tackle, like Mark said, the root of the issue, the root cause, because we can be reactionary and kind of, have these violent crime task force and things of that nature to handle the
avoid
problem
it.
that we're dealing with. But we don't rectify the root cause, which is coming from a point of ignorance, then we're going to continue to have the same issues. So yes, we could fund a task force, sure, but we could also fund, different community resources that can be in outreach to these areas of high crime, and perhaps provide them resourcing and support to kind of prevent these crimes from happening. Because a lot of these issues root from a point of poverty and a point of lack of education and resourcing. So you want to solve the big problem, you got to solve the root problem.
And then
Right.
the disciplinary it's like tape. It's not going to hold if you don't get a firmer foundation. So I agree with you that education is so important. Resources are so important. Branching out into the community, social policy, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, keeping strength and strengthening the foundation of a community is ultimately going to be the most positive influence you can have on the community. So that's definitely what you said about the root causes. Yeah, I'm in total agreement there. Absolutely.
So what I've come to realize in the field that I work in as well is that when we discipline children or adults or, offenders, things of that nature, if they don't truly understand the why behind, or if they don't truly understand, the cause and effect and what led to where they're at today and what they can do differently to prevent it from happening again, the issue is going to be continuous across a lifespan. It's a matter of providing proper knowledge, education, once again, and resourcing to these individuals so that they can understand the why behind their crimes or the why behind their decisions, and perhaps make a smarter one next time around. But if we're just more or less reactionary, like the task force, we're just reacting and then punishing people for their crimes, but not giving them a chance to rehabilitate or providing them resources to not do it again, you're going to continue to see the same issues.
That's a great perspective.
Definitely. Finally, for Indianapolis, there is another renewed push for pot, to legalize marijuana, which, as everyone knows, if they know anything about my law practice and me, I am a strong believer that marijuana should be legalized, and I am for the rights of sex workers. Those are two big issues of mine. Obviously, there's others, with, childhood poverty, education, and things like that. But some of these here, it's just like no brainer. Legalize pot. Just legalize this. It's all around the state of Indiana. It's legal. I know it's still not legal in Florida, but the GOP is objecting. They're opposing this bill that would bring some kind of legalization of marijuana to Indiana. And I just think, once again, talking about what Kristen mentioned, the social policies, this is a social policy that is legalize it, regulate it, tax it. Those to me are just some simple issues. Yeah, it may be hard to get money to say, hey, we're going to build this community. We're going to give. this area, Brightwood or something like that here in Indianapolis, $25 billion or whatever to build this area up or build this new school, even though they seem to have money to build sports domes and all that kind of stuff. But here's something that if people just say, hey, if you don't want to smoke marijuana, don't. I mean, you let people smoke cigarettes, and you let people drink alcohol. So
you don't have to indulge if you don't like to. And we talked about overcrowding. When you're criminalizing nonviolent crimes, I mean, you're paying for that with your taxes. That's, you know what I mean? So if we wanted to, this would be a great move in the direction to overcrowding is a huge issue in the system. And when we have overcrowding, then we can't have the resources in prisons and jails to rehabilitate the prisoners, which is the point of jail. It's not supposed to be like a timeout. You're supposed to rehabilitate them into society so they can adapt and change and grow. And it's kind of ridiculous to think about how expensive it is housing, feeding, rehabilitating someone who just like smokes a joint once a week or is, it's kind of ridiculous.
It's silly. Yeah, absolutely.
Very ridiculous.
And I agree with that. And kind of like circling back to, all three of these topics so far. I mean, once again, we have funding and, lack of funding in a metropolitan area, high levels of poverty. Look at states surrounding us that have not only legalized medical marijuana, but have also legalized the recreational use of marijuana. State of Michigan is a prime example of a state that's now flourishing economically in ways that they haven't before prior to the legalization and recreational and medical. It's putting a lot of money back into these communities that perhaps had a lack of funding or a lack of opportunity, and being able to kind of give back to the community in a sense. And plus, honestly, to be completely fair, I think going back to those social policies, I think we're kind of stuck in an era of tabooism. It's cliche. It's not something we talk about, right? Ooh, marijuana, ooh. So I think if we more or less try to work on the normalization and focus on the different positives that they can provide, that marijuana provides economically, different ways that promotes positive physical health, mental health, emotional health, you name it. We can kind of change that perspective and really see some change. But I think Indiana as a whole, as a state, we're famous for kind of being the last ones to hop on the train, So it's like, surrounding areas are kind of on board. I think the more or less we normalize it, the quicker we can get that GOP to make a decision.
Wow.
I totally agree. And with that, I will be signing off and I will turn the rest of it over to you three. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanks, Mark. You too.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, ladies show. Hello. Nice to see everybody again. I'm Madison. We've got Kristen and Neveah here. This is a really special show. I'm glad that we have some female voices, dominating the conversation. I'm very excited. So I had a couple more little indie tidbits to throw out. So apparently, are you guys familiar with the tattoo artist and makeup entrepreneur, Kat Von D?
Yeah.
By Kat Von D? Well, Kat Von D is ditching LA and her famous long-standing tattoo parlor. This tattoo parlor, it was like $500 minimum for any tattoo. So she's very esteemed. And she's moving to Indiana. She just bought a house in Indiana and is looking to set up a shop after she renovates her house. So within the next 2 years, we've got a big influence happening in Indiana with Kat Von D coming in and setting up shop. So that was something that was interesting.
Welcome, Kat Von D. Welcome, Indiana, honey.
To the community, all right. I think it's kind of funny to see really established artists sort of leaning away from the Los Angeles scene. I know we saw this with Jeffree Star moving to Wyoming not too long ago. His situation was a little different. He had predatorial charges, so he was sort of like escaping cancel culture in a sense. So he's kind of different. But also
Nashville's a huge new hotspot for celebrity and musicians, which is why it's incredibly getting more expensive to live there.
Oh, interesting. It's kind of interesting. We're moving away from the artists living in California, breaking that barrier a little bit and realizing that art doesn't just live in Los Angeles and New York City. there's artists and entrepreneurs littered across the country, which is something very interesting to think about.
I mean, think about it too, Madison and Kristen. You know, these people are constantly in the spotlight. Imagine having some paparazzi follow you to every nook and cranny that you're in, and every step that you take, you're being watched. I mean, shoot, if I were these celebrities and I had the funding, I would be up in the mountains. You can't find me. I'm having
Be in Oregon.
my time.
Yes, I know we're seeing that too with Elon Musk. Even he's leaving California and he's moving to Texas, which sort of rubs me weird in a way, because it almost seems like Elon Musk and the Elon Musk types are just very cryptic in the way that they lead their lives. So for him to be moving to Texas right when all of this political unrest is going on with the anti-abortion and the continuous divide between women's rights and what they choose to politicize, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not really sure. Yeah, what do you guys think about that? Elon Musk moving to Texas?
I think there were some financial and like tax reasons, and I think I don't know much about it, but I think his program is there, and it's easier to legally do his program there. There's just more resources there, I guess, for his goals and objective, but I really don't know much about it.
I don't know much about it either, but what I can say is that would be pretty ideal if we can get someone like Elon Musk on board with promoting women's rights and kind of, you know, having that face of a movement. That would be phenomenal. You know, hey, we can dream, but
yeah, especially on the stage of technology too. He's a leadership in technology, and technology is a global affair too. So for him to make a political stance about being pro women and pro women's rights, you're right, that would be a mass movement for us. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that's a light at the end of the tunnel here. Moving toward the police department is feeling heat from the mandatory vaccines, the COVID vaccine mandates. Chicago officers are losing pay and losing their jobs for not complying to the vaccine mandates. And in addition to that, Senator Mike Braun of Indiana is welcoming them to Indiana. So he's sort of taking refuge to alienated Chicago officers. And he mentioned this in a press conference as well. So you might be seeing a little bit of an influx in the police being from different places in the local Indiana community, which I thought was interesting.
Could probably benefit us a little bit too, to kind of get a different perspective and have, you know, officers that are in the field working a city like Chicago coming to somewhere like Indianapolis, because it gives us a perspective that maybe we don't possess here in Indy that maybe could make a difference. So
right.
I hope.
Absolutely. And almost even giving like a small town feeling to a city officer too could kind of broaden that perspective as well. Yeah, good thinking, good thinking. In addition, there will be free bus rides on Thanksgiving Day. So bleeding into the weekend, take advantage of those free transportation opportunities provided by the IndyGo. So Neveah,
really nice that people of, you know, any kind of economical standpoint can still have traveling resources to see their loved ones, because the holidays are really expensive and a huge burden financially. The traveling, the food, even the clothing, you know. So I think that's wonderful that they're doing that on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, awesome. So Neveah, I kind of want to transfer the focus over to you a little bit. You have a wide background in the city of Indiana, and you have a lot of participation in local services and communities. Could you give us a little background about what you do in the city?
All right, absolutely, Miss Madison. So I am a model. I've been modeling for about 10 years now. I do that on the side, but my primary work is in child welfare. So I have history of working for the Department of Health and Human Services in Michigan, doing child protection investigations for about 3.5 years. And then I came down here to Indy, and since being in Indiana, I went solo. I'm a contractor. I do home-based casework, parent education, you name it, with clients that are referred from the department. Or clients that are working with community mental health, or even perhaps probationary services, both on the juvenile and the adult spectrum. I am very active in the community as far as resourcing. So that Thanksgiving tip, I'm definitely going to be telling some of my clients about the busing. That is very helpful. But otherwise, my background is in preventative education and child welfare. So, definitely providing the supports to those in need and trying to break some of those cycles of social mobility within a area like Indianapolis is key to be able to kind of work on some issues that perhaps we have in this area, but definitely happy to be a part of the movement.
I know that social work and child welfare and these social policy jobs are extremely mentally taxing. Do you have any advice or tips for someone who wants to go into these kinds of resources or work, to how you kind of keep everything organized, stable, and you don't let your work consume you?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking that, Kristen. So in this field, burnout's very common, right? I mean, you're exposed to the element, kind of similar to, fields like law enforcement or the medical field. The levels of burnout because of the type of trauma and the type of things that you face and deal with on a regular basis can be taxing. Big word of advice for anyone that's going into the field: if you have a passion for helping others, it's definitely a good avenue to be able to pursue. However, the biggest word of advice is be able to have good boundary setting. Put yourself and make time management a priority, because you can't, if you get to the point where you're answering client calls and doing things after business hours, you're going to burn yourself out.
And then you can't help other people if you burn yourself out. It's just kind of like that airplane metaphor. Like, if you don't put your mask on first and you pass out, then you're not going to be able to put the mask on the child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing too, is that I always say to my clients, you can't fill somebody else's cup if yours is bone dry, right? So make sure that you're taking care of yourself, make sure you're self-care, and make sure you're setting those boundaries and not allowing yourself to take work home. So one thing that I used to do, it was kind of a more metaphorical practice for me when I was in child protection, is on my drive home, I would listen to certain music and I would leave the headspace of work. And as I'm driving home, I'm entering into my personal life. And I left the one here and I went home to the other, kind of having that separation. Because if you bring work home and you bring those feelings and that trauma and that stress that you experience on the job, it's going to kind of impact that personal life. And all of a sudden your cup's bone dry. So self-care.
I think boundary setting is really important to take away from that, because I think that's kind of a really hard skill to develop, especially when you're young, but it's really important, especially when you're going into the workforce, if you want to be a productive member of the society and continue to keep contributing without burning out, like you stated.
Yeah, time management's a tricky thing that people in this industry kind of struggle with, because, especially for me, I've gone independent. With that said, I have to make my own schedule. I have to schedule time to be able to meet clients. And, everyone kind of has their different lifestyles and things that they have going on. But if you kind of are firm with yourself and with your clients, this is the time I have available. This is the time that I can provide for you. It kind of allows you time to provide time for yourself too, so definitely important.
And that's something they don't really teach you in school or out of school, is ways to protect your energy. So the fact that you have a plan set in play: when I leave that space, I enter my own space, that is beyond professional. And that the way that you can help yourself, help others is very important. And so I'm glad we got to talk about that today.
Thank you, Madison.
Fabulous. Absolutely. Okay, so sort of transitioning into national and or world news. I just want to shout out to Michigan. So I know you said you were from Michigan or worked in Michigan before. Michigan now requires all public restrooms to carry free menstrual products, and they are the very first jurisdiction of its kind. Yay! So all public restrooms, it's absolutely mandatory that there are menstrual products available and that they're absolutely free. So we should be hopefully seeing a domino effect of this sort of behavior, not only in the rest of the state and the rest of the region, but hopefully in the rest of the country.
Well, yeah, period products are medical care, and they're necessary in order not to, so it is ridiculous that the tax is like that when it's medical care, and other medical,
Yeah. They give away free condoms at Planned Parenthood. When you walk in, there's always a bowl of them on the counter. Let's normalize the same thing with pads and tampons. Am I right? I know
Right.
that Governor Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, actually not only this having these products in public restrooms, but she also eliminated the tax on it. So there's no more taxes on feminine products in the state of Michigan, which is a really big jump for us because that's something that's been in discussion for years. You know, that's something we've been talking about, and hopefully with Michigan kind of being that forefront of
Startup.
change, we can see that spread nationwide.
I really hope to see that because it is a little ridiculous.
A little delayed too, like leading into 2022, and it took that long for the very first mandate for an entire public restroom mandate with the product. So that's insane. Yes, steps in the right direction, absolutely, without a doubt. Okay, so we're gonna be moving on a little bit. A little reference: Hungary is getting buddy with China. In world news, they have just cracked down on perceivable news, mass control of media, and it is now illegal, completely illegal, to represent gayness in schools, TV, and art on a countrywide basis. And they've also reinstalled programs to re-Christianize the country. The country, with mass being demanded in primary schools. So all the children are starting off their day in mass, and this is public schools too. So this is not just private institutions. So that's sort of interesting that we're moving towards sort of like a new age, free world kind of energy collectively together, and we still have got little areas being sort of plucked off by I don't want to say darkness, but controlling the media and making it illegal to be gay out loud is a little dark for my taste, and I feel just not right. What do you guys think about that?
That's like a lot to process. Sorry.
Sorry,
That's horrible that like basic human rights are being taken away. Big component of live and let live, and that's such a I'm sorry, I'm processing. That's insane to me.
Absolutely. It's a lot to take in, you know, because you think of different countries that kind of have, government controlled media, right? Russia, that's a modern day country that also has government controlled media, going back in time here, the Soviet Union, communism. I mean, there was kind of something that I thought maybe we aged out of. But it appears that perhaps we're taking a few steps back in that realm, especially when it comes to, being outspoken about your sexuality. I feel like as, an entire planet at this point, we've kind of been progressing in LGBT rights and acceptance of the community and kind of being more transparent about who we are and what we are and being proud of that. So hearing the country's kind of taking a few steps back, and personally, actually, I'm primarily Hungarian. I'm a Hungarian gypsy bloodline. So that's kind of disheartening. I'm hoping that maybe perhaps it can, once things kind of settle down and maybe perhaps we normalize these different things that they're trying to, create a taboo in, maybe the power and strength in numbers of love can kind of outweigh that and maybe make a difference in the future.
Definitely. I'm 1/4 Hungarian too, so that's awesome. That's why I made a point to bring some awareness to the situation too. And we know that when we start cracking down on that restrictions as well, there's going to be a big imbalance in this sort of like way that they try to make up for it, you know what I mean? So
it's going to cause
that's going to cause a lot of waves trying to do one extreme over the other regardless. So
it's going to cause political unrest. It's going to cause radicalization,
radicalization 100%. So they're aiming to do something more conservative, but I feel like the result of that kind of thing is always the opposite direction. So
I mean, think about it this way. Let's imagine our lives as kids. Let's keep it simple. When your mom and your dad or your parent or whoever told you, no, you can't do this, how much more did you want to do it? You know what I mean? Let's rebel the system. No, this is what I want to do. I mean, that's just basic psychology. It creates more of a temptation. So if you input more control and more, sanctions in place to kind of eliminate free speech and eliminate, thoughts and expression and kind of, identity issues here, you're going to have a lot of kickback. Like you guys said, there is going to definitely be, some sort of political stand down or some sort of rioting, whatever the case may be, but it's gonna ruffle some feathers. So I hope Hungary is prepared for that.
Exactly.
Did you guys see last week that the FDA and the CDC director approved the booster for 18 and older? So you can get that for free at your local pharmacy. So that's exciting news because before it was set to a higher age, but now anyone over 18 can get the booster for the new season.
Oh, very cool.
Nice.
So sort of opening the floor to any last thoughts, ladies, anything left to say? Last.
I ain't got nothing, but I will say that these topics today were definitely interesting. I'm glad I was able to kind of participate and be here with you ladies today. I know that I am also local in Indianapolis, like I said too. And if you guys are looking for any sort of, if you ever come to the area, if you're looking for some good Italian food, I work at a restaurant called Ristorante Roma, and it's in Carmel. And I will be there tonight, but I will think of you guys in spirit. Come visit me next time you're in Indy.
What's your favorite thing to order there?
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's tough. There's between two things, either the steak, if it's a filet and it's phenomenal, or what we call the Basciola, and it's with the pappardelle noodle. And I had that last night. I wouldn't turn it down for the life of me. Come visit me. You won't regret it.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on. And it was so interesting to hear your interest and your participation in
Your service to the
work.
community also.
Yeah, and we really do applaud you because that is a very strenuous and mentally tough job. So thank you so much. And thank you for all your tips about, boundary setting in the workplace. I know personally, I feel like I can apply what I learned today. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Kristen. That was so sweet. Thank you, Madison. I appreciate you two having me today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. And please, State of Indiana, please check out our podcast. You can watch and listen on Spotify, Google Pods, citycirclenews.org, and YouTube. And thank you so much for your time today.
And on our website, if you have any comments or requests for us, topics you want us to cover, let us know. Go to our website. There's a comment box.
Absolutely. Thanks, Indiana.
Thank you.